I tried a random hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon X. But wait, there's a twist. YouTuber Barry Nerd Corner added a rule to my challenge to make the game harder after I win every gym badge. After a while, these rules could quickly stack up and create the hardest Pokémon challenge I've ever faced. In a Nuzlocke, if a Pokémon faints, it's dead forever, and I can only encounter one new Pokémon per area. The rest of the rules for this playthrough are on the screen and in the description down below. Let's get started. As per usual, our challenge starts with picking up a starter. I get the choices between Noctowl, Phanpy, and a Mega Charizard. Of course I picked Charizard, well, because it's also a Mega Evolution. To make things even better, it has Parental Bond, meaning it always attacks twice. Welcome to the team, Pearl Jam, and also sorry about the graphics, they improve right here. The first randomized encounter is a Magikarp, which will be a phenomenal Pokemon when it evolves into Gyarados. Unfortunately, our other encounters suck. Azumarill, Surskit, Sunkern, and Nidorina Female are all horrible encounters. Well, maybe except for Nidorina Female. It's not like that matters because we Parental Bond Charizard to take on Viola and her bug types. I forgot to mention enemy teams aren't randomized to give us a fair shot of beating the game. Anyway, Viola leads with Sunkern and I lead off with Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam outspeeds to hit 2 Embers, leaving Surskit in the yellow, but this thing has Cursed Body, disabling my Embers. To make things worse, it goes for Water Spout, weakening my power. Still, a scratch is enough to pick up the KO, leaving Vivillon. I hit some scratches for decent damage before taking a tackle for a bit of damage. On the next turn, I hit a scratch before taking an infestation for passive damage, which is pretty bad. This is the reason why your ace Vivillon is considered to be so scary in Nuzlocke. By this point, Ember is no longer disabled luckily, so a set of those pick up the KO, winning me the battle and the first gym badge. Anyway, it's time for our first rule from Barry Nerd Corner. Barry, take it away.
Hey Berloom, congrats on your first badge. Here's your first rule. After every gym badge, you must release or permanently box one Pokemon that participated in that gym battle.
After this, I find a Shedinja, which has Wonder Guard for some reason. I'm not sure what the odds of that happening are. With that, we're in Lumia City, and this time I get another starter after defeating Sycamore. I pick up Mega Mawile. I'm not even going to look at the other 2 losers. The encounter Bonanza doesn't stop there, as I get a Skrelp, which is a pretty decent Pokemon, especially with Drizzle. I also pick up a Larvitar, which will be a great Pokemon when it evolves. I also pick up a Bonsly, which will be used for a later purpose in the challenge. After this, I find a Gible in the cave, which is another great Pokemon. And for my last encounter, I find a Delibird, which is pretty questionable, but will also have a later use down the line. With that, we're ready to face Grant for badge number 2. He leads off with a Mora, and I lead off with Taylor the Sunkern. Taylor sucks, which is why I named her Taylor Swift. I then switch into Drake with Drizzle on a resisted Aura Beam, doing very little damage. However, it does lower my attack, which is pretty annoying. On the next turn, Aurora goes for a Thunder Wave, paralyzing me before I hit a Water Pulse, doing decent damage. I then have to tank a takedown before getting the KO with a Water Pulse, leaving Grant's ace Tyrant. I'm pretty low on HP here, so I gotta switch out into the saving grace of the run, Parental Bond Pearl Jam on a Rock Tomb. At this point, Pearl Jam has learned Dragon Rage, which is pretty good because it does exactly 80 damage on the next turn, which gets the KO on Tyrant, winning me the battle and the second gym badge. With 2 badges, it means it's time for another rule from Barry, so you know the drill. Barry, take it away.
Nice job beating Grant. Now for your second rule. From now on, you cannot edge your levels. If any of your Pokemon overlevel during a gym battle, you must swap them out immediately.
Abiding by Rule 1, the Pokemon I choose to release is Taylor Swift the Sunkern, which is completely useless. Speaking of useless, I pick up a Goldeen, another horrible encounter. On the not so useless side, I pick up a Mareep, which is a phenomenal Pokemon. I also pick up a Meganium, which is another solid Pokemon. With that, we're facing Serena in a single battle. She leads off with Meowstic and I lead off with Pearl Jam. On the first turn, this little devil hits me with a Fake Out, flinching me. On the following turn, I'm able to clap back with a Fire Fang for decent damage before tanking a Disarming Voice. Luckily, on the next turn, I'm able to go for another Fire Fang to pick up the KO. Second is Absol, who hits a priority quick attack before a Fire Fang is able to get the clean one-shot. Serena's third and final Pokemon is a Braixen, who lives a Dragon Rage in the red HP range and only retaliates with a Psybeam luckily. Luckily, on the next turn, I'm able to go for another Dragon Rage to pick up the KO, winning me the battle. Pearl Jam also levels up and learns Flame Burst, which is a pretty decent move. With that, we're off to face Karina for badge number 3. She leads off with Mienfao, and I lead off with Elton the Masquerain. Mienfao outspeeds and hits a Fake Out for some chip damage, meaning we cannot attack. On the next turn, I outspeeded a Gust for decent damage before tanking a Power Punch. Luckily, a follow-up Gust picks up the KO. Her second Pokemon is a Machoke, and since Elton's pretty low, I switch out into Bach on a Rock Tomb. Thankfully, it only does a whopping 5 damage. On the next turn, I have to tank a Leer before hitting a Fairy Wind for a little less than half of Machoke's HP. A few Leers, Fairy Winds, and heals later, I pick up the KO with another Fairy Wind. Karina's last Pokemon is a Hawlucha, so I switch into Train the Gyarados on a Power-Up Punch. After tanking a boosted Flying Press, I miss my Ice Fang, which is pretty bad. Hawlucha then sets up some Hone Claws before I'm able to hit a hard Ice Fang. And then luckily on the following turn, Hawlucha goes for another Flying Press before an Ice Fang gets the KO, winning me the battle and the third gym badge. This also means another rule. Also, I'd like to point out we made these rules before I came up with the idea of randomizing Pokemon, so I think he really meant 1 Megastone per team. Anyway, Barry, take it away.
Well, now that you've beaten Karina, you will soon be able to use Mega Evolution, so let's make it interesting. You can only have one Pokemon that can Mega Evolve on your team at any given time. It is allowed to Mega Evolve, but you can only have one on your team. So you cannot have Lucario and Venusaur, for example, whatever Kanto starter you got. You can only have one. So good luck.
Abiding by the first rule, I kick Elton off the team. Thank you for your service. Anyway, Karina wants to challenge us again for a third time, this time with a Mega Lucario. I get a Mega Kangaskhan, which would be a great Pokemon. Kangaskhan is an amazing counter because, oops, never mind. Well, to make up for it, I get a Tyrant, which is a pretty phenomenal Pokemon. I also get a Cherub, marking the spiritual return of the Cherry Pie. With these new encounters, it's time to face Ramos and his grass types for badge number 4. I'm not too worried for this fight as I have a bunch of decent Pokemon. Anyway, Ramos leads off with his Jumpluff, and I lead off with Ice Spice the Delibird. Ice Spice tanks an Acrobatics for a massive damage before he's able to go for a Fly. The Fly ends up doing a little more than half, but since I'm dead to another Acrobatics, I have to switch out into Train the Gyarados, who tanks the Acrobatics much better. Jumpluff has a final parting gift in a Leech Seed doing passive damage every turn before I pick up the KO with an Ice Fang. Second is his ace Go-Goat, who goes down to a couple of Ice Fangs as we tank passive damage from Leech Seed. Last is Weepinbell, but this thing is so weak that I'm able to go for one Ace Fang to get the KO, winning me the battle and the 4th gym badge. I was surprised that Leech Seed was such a big deal, but hey, it's Ramos, so it shouldn't be a big deal. Anyway, that's the 4th gym badge, which means it's time for another rule.
With 4 badges, it's time for your 4th rule. From now on, you cannot use any moves that exclusively boost your own stats. If they boost them as a side effect in addition to doing damage, that's totally fine. So Power-Up Punch, totally fine. Swords Dance, banned.
Abiding by rule number 2, here are all the rules in case you forgot. We release Ice Spice, who can't even fare against Jumpluff. Never mind the rest of the game, this guy is completely useless. Anyway, to make up for it, I pick up a Krokorok, who's going to be an amazing Pokemon. I also evolve Uranium the Gible into a Gabite, which would be great into Clement and its electric types. Speaking of Clement, we can go ahead and face him for badge number 5. Clement had a much better role in the anime, but here he kind of sucks. I lead off with Ryan Adams, and he leads off with Almogia. I hard switch out into Wooly the Ampharos for his debut battle on an Aerial Ace, doing very little damage. Almogia's random ability allows him to set up the Hail, which is actually pretty annoying as I do have to tank another Aerial Ace plus Hail Chip. A Thunder Punch on the following turn does decent damage as Almogia Voltages out into his ace Heliolisk. Heliolisk immediately gets a critical hit Thunderbolt on his first turn, which is actually pretty annoying. At the very least, I connect with a Confuse Ray to confuse this thing. Thanks to the Hail Chip, I'm low on HP, meaning it's off to Uranium on the following turn as Helios goes for a Thunderbolt. Luckily, Uranium walls this thing fairly well as he can't really hit me with anything other than Quick Attack. After taking a Quick Attack, a Bulldoze leaves Helios barely alive, which kind of sucks. This then means Clement's going to heal, but this does actually give me a pretty special opportunity. This allows me to set up the Sand, which boosts my special defense and my ground moves. Helios then snaps out of his confusion and hits a Quick Attack, which triggers Effect Spore. This means that Helios is going to take a snooze. A few turns later, and a Bulldoze knocks him out. Second is Magneton, who also falls in a couple of Bulldozes, but sets up an Electric Terrain. And then Emolgi just goes down to a Dragon Claw, winning me the battle and the 5th Gym Badge. By now I'm sure you know the rules, so take it away, Barry.
Alright, now things get interesting. You just beat Clement, and now it's time for you to add one of my favorite Kalos Pokemon to your team. You must go capture a Helioptile, name it Sub to BNC, and add it to your team permanently. It can freely evolve to Heliolisk, you can EV train it, whatever you want, but you have to have this Helioptile Heliolisk named Sub to BNC on your team from now on. Have fun.
Okay, this next one is kind of weird. Since we made these rules before I came up with the idea of randomization, I instead have to add the next encounter in my team permanently because I can't find a Heliolisk. I also released Ryan Adams after this, well, because he's a busted Pokemon. After this gym badge, use the trek to Fairy City. In between, I get to encounter a Fennekin, who I end up killing, so there's that. More importantly, before we can get the encounter, we have to fight Serena. She leads off with Meowstic, and I lead off with Wooly. Meowstic immediately outspeeds to set up a light screen, meaning my Thunder Punch is absorbed by Meowstic. This is not looking good. Luckily, a few Thunder Punches and Power Gems pick up the KO after tanking some Disarming Voice Chip. Serena's second Pokemon is an Absol, so I switch out into Pearl Gem on a Slash. Thankfully, the Slash doesn't get a critical hit or do too much damage. And then from here, I'm able to go for a few Flame Blasts to get the KO. Her last Pokemon is a Delphox, but I switch out into Uranium, who's able to go for a couple of Bulldozes to take Delphox out, winning me the battle. After this, it's time to face Valerie for badge number 6. She leads off with Mawile, and I lead off with Sada the Goldeen. I immediately switch out into Pearl Jam as Mawile goes for a Crunch. On the following turn, a set of Flame Bursts is enough to pick up the KO due to this thing's Steel type. Her next Pokemon is a Mr. Mime, and I go for the same thing. 2 Flame Blasts leaves this thing in the yellow, and it sets up a light screen, which is pretty annoying. Luckily, on the following turn, 2 more Flame Blasts are enough for the KO. Valerie's third Pokemon is her a Sylveon. Sylveon comes in and tanks decent damage from some Flame Bursts and then goes for a Dazzling Gleam. Since I'm low on HP after the Dazzling Gleam, I gotta switch out into Wooly on a Quick Attack, which thankfully does very little damage. On the next turn, I go for a Confuse Ray as Sylveon actually manages to hit itself in confusion. Wow, for the first time I'm not on the receiving end of hitting myself in confusion. I keep spamming discharges until Valerie heals up with a potion. And then since I'm low, I have to switch out into Pearl Jam again, who's able to go for 2 more Flame Bursts to get the KO, winning me the battle and the 6th Gym Badge. That Sylveon gave me so much trouble. Anyway, another badge means another rule. Take it away, Barry.
Congrats on badge number 6. Now it's time for rule number 6. Ironically, changing your team size from 6 to 5. From now on, you can only have 5 Pokemon on your team at any given moment.
The Pokemon I released this time is Sada, who was used as a pivot. Bye bye, buddy. And then after this, something weird happens. My encounter ends up being a Helioptile, which abides with the original Rule 5. So I guess it works, I'm not sure. Anyway, I name him Sub to BNC, evolve him, and add him to the team. After the new edition, it's time to face Olympia for badge number 7. Her lead Pokemon is a Sigilyph, and I lead off with Oi the Krokorok, who is now fully evolved. Oi immediately outspeeds and goes for a Crunch to get the clean one-shot instantly. Her second Pokemon is a Slowking, and looking back on it, I probably should have switched out. Anyway, I go for a Crunch, which almost gets the KO, but this thing goes for a Yawn. Lorelei then heals up, but luckily my Crunch gets a better damage roll, getting the clean one-shot. Olympia's third and final Pokemon is a Meowstic, and I switch out into Pearl Jam as Oi falls asleep. Meowstic just goes for a fake out, meaning I'm able to go for a couple of flamethrowers to eventually get the KO, winning me the battle and the 7th gym badge. Also, I got rid of Oi after this fight. Thank you for your service. You will actually be missed, unlike other Pokemon. What won't be missed is this rule from BNC. Take it away.
Alright, you're in the home stretch. Here's rule number 7. Until you gain your next gym badge, you may not capture any new Pokemon. Any encounters are null and void, so you may backtrack after you get your badge, but you cannot add any new Pokemon to your team until you get the final gym badge.
With that, some random guy decides to make me choose a button to save the world. I pick the correct one, but the guy decides to blow up the world anyway, starting with this random town with 3 people living in it. Way to go. With that, it's time to face Lysander. He leads off with Mienshao, and I lead off with Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam is able to go for 2 Dragon Rages before tanking a high jump kick. Thankfully, the high jump kick doesn't do too much damage. And then on the following turn, I'm able to go for another set of Dragon Rages to get the KO. Lysander's next Pokemon is a Gyarados, so I switch out into Sub to BNC for his debut battle. And it's not exactly a great debut, as Gyarados just goes for an Outrage to immediately take Sub to BNC out. I mean, I expected a better performance. Thankfully, I have Wooly, who's able to take the Outrage far better, and then is able to go for a Discharge to get the clean one-shot. Third is Pyroar, so I pivot into Pearl Jam on a Fire Blast. And then on the next turn, a set of Dragon Rages does decent damage, as Pyroar yet again goes for another Hyper Voice, this time doing a little more damage. Since I'm low, I switch out into Drake on another Hyper Voice, doing again very little damage. After taking a final Hyper Voice, I'm able to go for a Surf, which gets the clean one-shot on Pyroar. Last is Honchkrow. Eventually, after doing some switching, I switch out into Wooly on a Steel Wing. And then from there, I'm able to go for a Discharge to cleanly finish Lysander, winning me the battle. Lysander still activates the legendary Pokemon, which actually turns into Mewtwo. Still, I don't catch it, abiding by Rule 7, and also even if I could, I wouldn't because legendaries are banned for me, unlike Barry. After this is another Lysander fight, but it's completely identical to the last one, and he has a Mega Gyarados, so for time's sake we can skip it. Also, I may or may not have accidentally lost a bunch of the footage on my computer since I started the first recording, then stopped the recording to look at his team, and yeah, it became a whole mess. With that, it's time to get the 8th and final gym badge from Wulfric. He leads off with an Abomasnow, and I lead off with a random Sudowoodo, who I hard switch into Alex, who is now evolved. He tanks the Ice Beam fairly well. A Rock Slide on the next turn then gets the clean one-shot. Wulfric's second Pokemon is a Cryogonal, and somehow this thing outspeeds to set up the Hail before I'm able to go for another Rock Slide, which luckily gets the clean one-shot. I have no clue how this little thing managed to outspeed me, but oh well. This really isn't looking good, especially with Avalugg setting up curses. I hard switch out into Pearl Jam, who's able to go for a couple of flamethrowers to luckily eviscerate this thing, winning me the 8th and final gym badge. Honestly, the gyms in this game are so easy, and I wasn't really expecting any problems. Speaking of problems, it's time for my final rule.
Congratulations on beating the 8th and final gym. Now it's time for your 8th and final rule. After you release a Pokemon, as per rule number 1, you must replace your highest level Pokemon on the team. Your strongest Pokemon basically gets to retire and live an easy life, no risk of death. So good luck with the Elite Four and the Champion, and I'll see you later, dude.
I had a Meganium who was mostly in the background and in a couple of fights, but you didn't really see him, so I don't know. Bye, buddy. On the way to Victory 4, I catch a Snorlax who's a pretty powerful Pokemon, but I never end up using him, so take a good long last look at Snorlax. In Victory Road, it's time for the final fight against Serena. I only have 4 Pokemon because I needed an HM slave. She leads off with Meowstic, and I lead off with Pearl Jam. Meowstic outspeeds hit a fake out for some chip, which is pretty annoying. On the next turn, Pearl Jam gets off a set of flamethrowers, which just eviscerates Meowstic. Her second Pokemon is an Altaria. My brain turns off as Altaria comes in because I go for a set of flamethrowers, as this thing then retaliates with a massive Dragon Pulse that would have just flat out killed if it got the crit. Thankfully it didn't, so I have to switch out into Train on a hard Dragon Pulse. At the very least, Train is able to tank it much better. And then on the following turn, I'm able to go for an Ice Fang, which just gets the clean one-shot on Altaria. Her third Pokemon is a Jolteon, which counters me fairly well. This means I have to hard switch into Uranium on a Discharge. Thankfully it does no damage because I'm immune. And then on the next turn, Jolteon just goes for a quick attack before I'm able to go for a Dig. Jolteon can't really hit me with anything other than quick attack, so I'm completely safe to stay in. And then on the following turn, a Dig gets the clean one-shot. Fourth is Delphox, and since I'm low on HP due to fighting all of these Victory Road trainers, I have to switch out. Luckily I have Alex, who completely walls Delphox with his typing and is able to get the KO with a few Earthquakes. Her last Pokemon is an Absol, and this thing gets off a couple of Night Slashes before going down to a few Earthquakes, winning me the battle. Like most characters in X and Y, Serena definitely had a better character in the anime. Okay, let's talk Elite Four teams. This gauntlet can be insane, so I need to bring my best Pokemon. I choose Uranium for his overall power, Pearl Jam for Parental Bond, Train due to his overall usefulness, and Ice Fang, Alex because he's an overall great Pokemon, and Wooly to counter all the water types we're going to be facing from Seabolt. Let's do this. First is Malva, the fire type specialist. She leads off with Pyroar, and I lead off with Uranium. Pyroar immediately outspeeds to get off a Noble Roar, which is very annoying as it lowers my attacking stats. This means the Dig I get off on the following turn only does around half of the damage that I wanted to, which is very annoying. However, I still decide to stay in because Pyroar can't really hit me, as evidenced when he goes for a Hyper Voice. A Dig on the following turn then is enough to get the KO. Second is Talonflame, who I can't hit for super effective damage, so it's off to Train on a hard Brave Bird. On the following turn, I then have to tank a critical hit Brave Bird, leaving you with just 20 HP. To make things worse, this thing has dry skin, meaning it restores HP and can't be hit by water moves. This isn't looking good. I hard switch out into Alex on a Brave Bird, which luckily does minimal damage. Talonflame then gets off a Flare Blitz on the following turn before I'm able to go for a Rock Slide, which just gets the KO. Finally, this took way longer than it should have. Third is Torkoal, who lives a Rock Slide in the red HP range, and then this thing goes for an Earthquake, which I didn't know it had. Anyway, the Earthquake does massive damage. Luckily, a follow-up Rock Slide is enough to kill the bulky turtle. Fourth and last is Chandelure, who outspeeds to hit a Flamethrower, bringing me into the red before being killed by an Earthquake. That was way harder than expected, and things could have quickly gone south. Second is Wickstrom, the Steel-type trainer, and I would feel bad about sweeping him, but now I don't after the Malva fight. Anyway, Pearl Jam sweeps his entire team with Flamethrowers, winning me a pretty easy battle. Third is Drasna, and I do not sweep her. She leads off with Dragalge, and I lead off with Train. Train outspeeds an Ice Fang for massive damage before tanking a hard Thunderbolt, which I didn't know Dragalge had. Drasna then heals up, and I hit some Ice Fangs. This repeats until Drasna doesn't heal up, and Train gets the knockout with another Ice Fang. Second is Altaria, who Train luckily outspeeds and is able to get the clean one-shot with, you guessed it, another Ice Fang. Her third Pokemon is a Noivern, who outspeeds at a Dragon Pulse, leaving me low on HP before I'm able to go for another Ice Fang to get the clean one-shot. Fourth and last is Druddigon. Since I'm low on HP, I switch out into Alex on a Limp Dragon Tail. This brings out Train again, who's already pretty low on HP. This means I have to switch out into Uranium on a Revenge. Uranium then goes for a Dig, as Druddigon goes for a Dragon Tail, which luckily misses because I'm underground. A Dig does around half HP before Druddigon goes for another hard Dragon Tail. Luckily, since Druddigon is low and I outspeed, I can go back underground for a Dig and then pick up the KO on the following turn. Looking back on the footage, I don't know why I just didn't go for a Dragon Claw, which was already super effective. But hey, it worked out, so who cares. The last Elite Four member is Seabolt. I was initially scared for this fight because I can't really hit water types, but luckily I remember I have Wooly. Against Clawitzer, a Thunderbolt gets the clean one-shot. Gyarados tries to set up on me with a Dragon Dance, but Wooly pulls through and is able to get the clean one-shot with another Thunderbolt. Then Barbaracle and Starmie fall to some Thunderbolts, winning me the battle and the Elite Four gauntlet. This means it's time to face the champion Diantha for the final climactic showdown of the playthrough. Diantha has some insane Pokemon, so there's no way we're making it out all alive. Diantha leads off with her Hawlucha, and I lead off with Wooly. Hawlucha immediately sets up a Swords Dance on the first turn, boosting her attack before a Thunderbolt gets the clean one-shot luckily. Diantha's second Pokemon is a Tyrantrum. I immediately set up a Light Screen on the first turn before taking a massive Head Smash. I know, what must happen. I set up a Light Screen which is pretty much useless before a Head Smash just smashes Wooly into pieces. RIP buddy. At the very least, I get a free switch into Uranium, who's able to outspeed on the next turn and go for a Dig as Tyrantrum just misses a Dragon Claw. A Dig then avenges Uranium, taking out the dinosaur. Third is Aurorus, so I hard switch into Pearl Jam on a Reflect. This is pretty bad. Pearl Jam then goes for a Dragon Rage on the following turn, doing decent damage as Aurorus goes for the Light Screen. A Flamethrower on the following turn does little damage as Aurorus connects with a Blizzard, which freezes me. Don't you just love it when a 70% accurate move gets a 10% freeze? That's just great. And then I stay fully frozen. What are the chances? On the next turn I Unthaw as Aurorus whiffs a Blizzard, and then on the following turn I outspeeded a Flamethrower which Aurorus lives. I then get frozen again with another Blizzard. Diantha then heals up, of course, for free must I add, because I stay frozen. I then hit a Flamethrower on the following turn, bringing Aurorus into the yellow, but then Aurorus gets a critical hit Blizzard because why not? Anyway, that sucks to lose my starter like that, but what can you do? At least Uranium comes in and gets off a Dragon Claw to immediately knock the dinosaur out. Fourth is Goodra, who thankfully is outsped and is killed by a Dragon Claw. Fifth is Gourgeist. I hard switch into Train on a Trick or Treat, turning me into a Ghost. Where have I seen this before? And then an Ice Fang on the following turn does decent damage before Gourgeist goes for a Phantom Force. Where have I seen this before? On the next turn I hard switch into Alex, who eats the Phantom Force. Diantha then heals back to full HP on the following turn, but it's too late because a Crunch then seals the deal and the pumpkin falls. Diantha's last Pokemon is her ace, Gardevoir, and this thing immediately intimidates me, so this isn't really looking too good. To make things worse, Gardevoir then Mega Evolves, which is insane, and then gets off another Intimidate. And of course, a Mega boosted Moonblast instantly kills Alex. RIP, you were a great dinosaur. I send in Train to hopefully clean things up and avenge the 4 fallen Pokemon from this run. Gardevoir then gets off a Thunderbolt before a Waterfall does massive damage and gets the clean one-shot, winning me the battle and the entire run. That ending was super tough. Kalos is overall a pretty easy game to Nuzlocke, which is why Barry and I decided on it. Honestly, it was pretty easy, and I always tend to play way less conservatively in the last 10% of a challenge than the other 90% combined. I think I could have completed this playthrough deathless, but hey, we'll never know. Anyway, if you find this pretty interesting, I totally recommend checking Barry's part of the challenge, which will be in the description. Thank you so much for collabing with me, Barry, and this was so much fun to do. If you found this video interesting, why not leave a like and subscribe to the channel for daily Pokemon content. And you should also follow my Twitter for updates on current videos. Anyway, I sunk so many hours into this project and I'm going to sleep. Have a great day.